Well, good afternoon. My name is Dan Nauman, and I'm from Kewaskum, Wisconsin, which is just north of Milwaukee, about 45 minutes. And I live in a rural area. And I've been foraging since 1979. Started out as a hobby. And I took classes around the country, different workshops, bought as many books as I could, time and money could afford. And long story short, in 1993, I quit my sales job and went into foraging full time. And it's been a great ride, a little bit of a roller coaster ride over the years, but the recession of '08 just about did me in, but here I am. I do have a shop in Kewaskum, and I'm a one-man band these days. However, at one time I had 14 employees and 3 locations. One was right up here in Door County in Bailey's Harbor, right next to the Blacksmith Inn. And we were there from about 1995 till about 2001. And then in the year 2000, we opened up a shop in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. Actually, it was an existing shop, but we took it over in 2000 and ran it until 2006. And in 2006, I was offered a position as foraging professor for the 3rd and 4th year students at the American College of the Building Arts in Charleston, South Carolina, and I darn near took the job. But at the last minute, I decided not to, for personal reasons. But I had already started to close up the Cedarburg shop. We had closed the Bailey's Harbor shop in '01 to concentrate our efforts on the Cedarburg shop and custom work. And I came to realize that retail wasn't working very well for me and decided to go and teach. And then when I decided not to do that, I closed up the Cedarburg shop and have been working solo out of the Kewaskum shop since '06. So here I am today. So what I've done is put together a slide presentation, and there is a bit of the teacher in me. So the first part of the presentation will be a little bit about what I do and how I arrive at designs and things of that nature. And because I teach not only out of my studio in Kewaskum, but also around the country at workshops and colleges. And I also lecture at some museums. So, all right, let's see if things are working here. And we'll try the first slide here. So, as in all aspects of art, metalwork begins with an idea. And how do I arrive at my ideas? Well, a lot of my ideas come from nature. And so as you can see here, the spider web, grapes, the nautilus shell. Nautilus shell is got the scroll pattern in there. And you can also see that in a lot in nature, in the fiddlehead fern and other items. And then of course, leaves and oak nuts and things of that nature. So I've often found when we try to interpret nature literally that we don't do so well. And so often the works are representative or figurative, and but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try for that realism if we want to. But getting back to the scroll pattern, you can derive a scroll from what is known as the golden ratio. And where does the golden ratio come from? It's an interesting question. And because the numbers, as you see on the screen, 1.0 to 1.618, by the way, that 618 goes on and on and on. The numbers don't really correlate mathematically, but the golden ratio is actually architecture 101. A lot of what we see today is derived from the golden ratio. And where did it originate? Okay. Some believe that it may have originated in art. Okay. We can see it in the Mona Lisa, Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, but I sincerely believe that man didn't invent it. It was invented by nature itself, okay? There's a video, and excuse me, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a video that explains all this as to where the golden ratio came from, and we can find it all over the natural world. But you see it more often than you realize. Your TVs today are derived, the shape of them is derived from the golden ratio. The Parthenon, if the, I can't remember the name of the feature. Anyway, if that were, I want to say cornice, but that's not the right word. Anyway, the Parthenon is, uses the golden ratio. These are gates in the Westover Plantation in Virginia, and they're also based on the golden rectangle, which is derived from the golden ratio. So very interesting. I have seen these gates in person. It's right on the James River. So evolution of an idea, the Weeping Willow Gate. I was asked to design a gate for this driveway, and it starts out with basically just some sketches, okay? And the sketches, I eliminate what I don't like and take what I like, and the drawing evolves from there. So there's an almost finished drawing, and but there's more work to do. And this client actually wanted leaves added to it. He originally liked this idea, but we went a bit further. So here's another concept. And again, this was for a single driveway gate, but notice that a lot of these drawings don't really work with each other, but some relate to each other. But again, you just start drawing, and I base a lot of my designs off of the environment around where the metalwork will reside. I also ask the client, what are your interests, your background, things of that nature, because I can also often put a bit of the elements of the client or the passions of the client into the metalwork. So these were the finished drawings I presented to the client, and they chose this one. And there you see the actual gates. This is in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. I just installed these last year. So, when I teach, I say, if you're going to be a good blacksmith, you got to learn to draw. And because drawing is the common thread throughout all the arts. And a lot of people say, Dan, I don't know how to draw. Well, I didn't know how to forge metal at one time. And so I learned. And so you don't know how to draw, learn to draw. Well, how do you learn to draw? You practice, just like anything else. That you want to do, whether it's art or golfing or fishing, whatever the case may be, you got to practice if you're going to get good at something. And practice isn't just once a week. Once a week is only maintenance. So practice requires you do something every day. Even if it's just a half an hour a day, practice. Whatever it is your passion is, practice. So there's my pontification for the day. Practice. So here is a concept drawing for the gates that you see. Well, let me just back up. The original drawings I submitted to this client were not even close to this. This is very classic, very French in nature. But the original drawings were very much more contemporary, very much more expressive in look. And when I presented the drawings to the clients, there was dead silence. And that's usually not a good sign. So anyway, the wife, I'd like something a little bit more presented to them. So anyway, which brings us to my portfolio. And we're going to start with gates and railings I've made over the years. This is a gate, the largest gate, probably the largest thing I've ever made. It's 27 feet wide and 14 feet tall. And it's it's the entrance gate to Linden Sculpture Garden in River Hills, Wisconsin, which is just north of Milwaukee. It was originally owned by the Bradleys, this sculpture garden. And this is another gate. This is the exit gate for the Linden Sculpture Garden. And originally they wanted something that reflected what the grounds were originally, which was a farm. And I said, well, you know, this is a sculpture garden, and I think that you might entertain having something more sculptural in design to give the audience a sneak peek as to what they might see when they come into the sculpture garden. So I gave them drawings of both classic designs and more contemporary expressive designs, as you've seen here. They obviously went for something more modern. So this is also at the Linden Sculpture Garden. This is an entirely bronze railing, and they wanted something. The director of Linden Sculpture Garden said he wanted a railing as if rings were falling off of the building next to it and bouncing off the ground. So I took that and ran with it, and this is one of my favorite works. I think the thing that I like most about it is that the rings aren't all in the same plane. They're twisting and turning, almost floating by themselves. This was an interesting design. It was a husband and wife. They're master gardeners. The garden you see behind it, they actually constructed the fieldstone walls themselves and did all the brickwork. And they are also armchair entomologists and have many shadow boxes of bugs in their living room, and I believe even in the dining room. I took that idea and ran with it. And I mean, the spider web obviously jumps right out at you, but there are other subliminal bug-like features, bug legs, bug abdomens, and so forth throughout the railing. This is Carroll College, the entrance to Carroll College, which is now, by the way, Carroll University. And this installation was in 1997, or I've got 2007 there, that should be 1997. This is a gate that nobody on a well-beaten path will ever see. This is just north of Port Washington, Wisconsin, and well off the beaten path. And gates can do one of two things. They can either say, keep out, or come on in. And I wanted this gate to say, come on in. And so you can see right through the middle of the gate. And there's also repeated throughout the design the number 3, because there's 3 members of the family. The family has this home in Port Washington as well as a home in Chicago. And so the piers on either side of the gate stand for both homes, and what's happening in between is the wind and the water, the turbulence that you would find in Lake Michigan. So between Chicago and Port Washington, you have wind and water, and also the harmony that they have when they work together. This is some items made for a home right up here in Door County, specifically Ellison Bay. And this was one of my earlier commissions, and did quite a bit of ironwork for them. Everything is exterior with the exception of the snake railing, which actually was a railing that went down 3 or 4 steps into a pool. And at the bottom of the pool, this is an indoor pool, by the way, was a bronze crocodile. So keeping with that, I decided to make a snake. And by the way, the metal that I used was the first and last time I used stainless steel. And there isn't any reason why I haven't used it since. It's just that I haven't had a need to, but it was a different, it was a learning experience to learn how to forge stainless steel. A little bit tougher to forge than mild steel, which is the primary steel that I use. On that note, just a teaching moment here, a lot of people call the end product of what I do wrought iron, and that's kind of a misnomer. Wrought iron is actually a material, not a product that the blacksmith makes. Wrought iron is the result of smelting the iron from ore, and it comes out in what little puddles called pigs. And this is where the term pig iron comes from. So wrought iron hasn't been used, or let me rephrase it, hasn't been made in this country since 1968. And it's a type of material that a blacksmith has to understand. It has a very linear grain structure to it, not unlike wood. And so it does things that you can't, let me rephrase that. You can do things in mild steel that you can't do in wrought iron. And so wrought iron, it takes a little bit of a learning curve, but once you understand its properties, it's fine to use. And a lot of smiths, well, let me rephrase that. There are some smiths today that still use wrought iron because they want to produce an authentic piece, much like the masters of old did, and use the original or the same material that the great masters did. So this client wanted a railing that represented the prairies of Wisconsin. So I incorporated some flowers that you might see in the prairie, and what you don't see in here, that I also incorporated an owl and an otter. This is one of 2 trellises I made for the executive residence in Madison. And I haven't seen it since I installed it, but, or them. And apparently what they were going to do is train roses to go up the sides of this and even over on top. So I'm sure a lot of the metalwork is being hidden by the roses, which is fine. But incorporated to the sides, I used Wisconsin icons, like the white-tailed deer is the state mammal, and the violet is the state flower. Robin is the state bird, so I incorporated these motifs. Both of these railings are right up here in Egg Harbor. 2 different homes, 2 different locations. So just moving on here. This railing, we actually removed. It was originally entirely wood, and the client removed all the balusters, and so I designed this grapevine railing. They wanted sort of a European flavor to the home, so we went with this. The railing with the stained glass rondelles has a lot of stained glass windows in the house. So here again, I wanted a teaser as to what visitors might see once they enter the property. Our railing on the lower right, I made for former Governor Patrick Lucey. And just a little aside here, when I went to install the railing, I used a drill that also pounds down at the same time as drilling, and I shook loose all the brickwork. And so obviously I had to stop, and a mason had to come back and repair the damage that I caused. So what I ended up using was something known as a core drill. It's a lot less vibration. And anyway, so it all worked out, and Governor Lucey was pretty good about the whole thing. He did say that you might not want to cash your check, Dan, because that way you've got my autograph. Well, I did cash it. So moving on to lighting. These are some candlesticks I made for Holy Family Catholic community in Fond du Lac. And they really opened the door up for me to go outside the box, do something less classic. And I really enjoy the movement in these candlesticks. The image on the far right shows a Paschal candlestick where the candle can be lifted right off of the stand and used in processions. I've made several of these style Paschal candles over the years. This is a fairly recent installation up near Hayward, Wisconsin. And this client had seen a chandelier, which you'll see later. He saw a chandelier at the Pabst Mansion that incorporated elk antlers. And this couple, one of the men was an architect, and he actually designed this chalet based on a hunt lodge out east, 1930s hunt lodge. And so in keeping with that, they wanted this woodland theme to it. So they dubbed their chalet Birch Point, and so incorporated into the chandelier are birch leaves. So these are pretty straightforward floor standing colonial style candlesticks, all for one client in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. I also made this chandelier for him for his great room, and he calls this his cabin. And it's a cabin, but it's more like a cabin. So, and then the chandelier on the right is again right up here in Bailey's Harbor. I made two of these for Bjorklund Lodge, and there's copper as well as mild steel in this. And I wanted to show the Scandinavian, that's what I'm looking for, influence that Door County has in this chandelier. So in the plate that I pierced in the bottom of the chandelier, you see a hint of rose mauling. So, candlesticks on the left were made for a church in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I'm actually making two more of them as we speak. They came back to me about a year ago and said they wanted two more. So I'm making two more of those at home right now. And then the other candlestick is right up here in Forestville, Wisconsin. And I've done numerous pieces for them as well. These are various candlesticks I've made, incorporating some metalwork that's called French repoussé. And French repoussé isn't practiced much today anymore. And God only knows why. I love the voluptuousness and how flowing French repoussé can be. And so if you look at the petals and the details of some of these elements, you can't get that with just a hammer and an anvil. This work is done with sheet metal. The metal is cold as you're working it. And so you're using little bitty hammers and stakes to shape the material. And I learned the process from a metal worker in Boise, Idaho, and just ran with it. But it is a very tedious, slow process. And I imagine the reason why it isn't practiced much today is just that. It's very slow, very tedious. And in our instant society, people want more instant results. So much of the lighting you'll see here incorporates repisite. The chandelier on the left was made for the Herman Eline mansion. Herman Eline was a former owner of the Schlitz Brewing Company in Milwaukee, and then the wall sconces were made for the Pabst mansion, Captain Frederick Pabst of Pabst Brewing fame. So here's the chandelier I was referring to earlier. The original chandelier was made by a very famous blacksmith from Austria who came to this country in 1893 with the German government to the Chicago Columbian Exposition. His name was Cyril Kulnick, and he was born in 1871 and he died in 1958. And after Captain Frederick Pabst died, the mansion was sold in about 1907 to the Catholic Archdiocese, and various bishops have lived there over the years. And they gradually sold off a lot of the, not just the metalwork, but a lot of the items in the mansion. And this the original chandelier ended up at a tavern in Milwaukee. And the tavern didn't want to sell it back, so the Pabst mansion had me reproduce the original chandelier. So I had many a beer under the original chandelier, examining and measuring it. And this is the result. It took 2 years, not back-to-back hours, but every time I worked on a section, I mentally prepared and did a lot of test pieces before I went to make the various aspects of the chandelier. This is the Herman Eline mansion of Pabst Brewing, or excuse me, Schlitz Brewing fame. It's an Italian Renaissance style mansion. They made these coach lamps for it. Moving on to fireplace equipment. This was a recreation of an arts and crafts style fireplace set. The client had given me a rather blurry picture. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but this was my interpretation of the image anyway. And another arts and crafts style set that I designed. The mica was used quite often in prairie style, and I like the warmth that it emits, and so I use copper and mica along with the mild steel in this design. This is one of my more favorite fireplace tool sets, and you get a kind of a clay-like feel from this set, kind of showing how plastic metal can be when it's hot. These are rather indicative of the 1980s when basket twist handles were very popular, and so were dragon heads. What's happened since is machinists learned how to make basket twists and started making them by the millions. And so the market got inundated with basket twists, and therefore I just simply don't like seeing them or making them anymore. If requested, I will make them, but they don't really trip my trigger. Every learning blacksmith makes basket twists. It is a fun thing to learn how to make, but stylistically these days you don't see them much anymore. So these are miscellaneous sets I've made over the years. Again, another set incorporating deer antler. And these are fire screens that an architect designed. I had to do some redesigning of them because the way he drew them, they couldn't easily be made out of metal, so I had to make a few changes, but I tried to keep as close to his designs as possible. Here again, we're looking at an architect that was very much into Frank Lloyd Wright. So you see a lot of 30 and 60-degree angles throughout the home. And so, yeah. More fireplace screens. These are right up here in the Ellison Bay at the Clearing Folk School. And again, the Clearing's architecture is reminiscent of the prairie style. So I incorporated mica into a wood box that also has fireplace tools. And a lot of their windows have this pyramid shape to them. And so I, again, incorporated that into the design. This is a design from the East Coast. I changed it a little bit to accommodate existing hinges in the fireplace. So it's a working fireplace, and but it's an adjustable, there's an adjustable handle on there so you can raise and lower a pot fairly easy. And a grapevine set of fire tools and another wood rack. This is a recent installation at the Pabst Mansion. This is a fire grate, and there are 2 existing fire grates at the mansion. So I used the existing grates for this design. The grates were originally made, again, by Cyril Kulnick. And so they were missing a grate in the grand entrance room for the Pabst Mansion, otherwise known as the Grand Foyer. And so they allowed me to take one of Kulnick's grates home to analyze how he made it. And then I came up with this version of the grate. So I just installed this a couple of months ago. And I don't know how it appears to you folks, but it was one of the more challenging projects I've done. There were many aspects to it that required a lot of pre-thinking and backwards thinking. So I wouldn't paint myself in a corner. Sometimes we have to work backwards from the finish to understand things like assembly, how it goes together. There's 227 pieces in this, not including rivets. There's 257 rivets in this piece. So moving on to liturgical items, I do a fair amount of work for churches. And this is also for Holy Family Catholic community in Fond du Lac. And so you can see repeating motifs in some of these pieces. This is also a piece I made for St. Peter's in Forestville. And this was using French repoussé in the fleur-de-lis and a lot of forge welding. And forge welding is fusing steel. You get the steel very hot and pound it together. So a lot of forge welding in this piece, and very classic design. And it also is a processional cross. The center shaft separates from the bottom stand and can be used in procession. The sculpture on the left is a sculpture that one of the few things I haven't designed. It was actually designed by a woman just down the road from me by the name of Sandy Painish. And the church she attends wanted me to make not only this sculpture, this is a 4-foot tall sculpture, but I also made a 12-foot version for the exterior of the church and a 2-foot version as a present for the pastor at the time. And then the sculpture on the right is at the church that I attend in West Bend, Wisconsin. And it represents the fact that our church is very involved in missions. So a lot of money and time is dedicated to the mission field around the world. Moving on to sign brackets. Sign on the right is at obviously the Blacksmith Inn in Bailey's Harbor, which is right next door to the shop that I worked in from 1995 till 2001. And so yeah, very, very nice place, by the way, if you ever need to stay at a bed and breakfast. It's a wonderful, very charming bed and breakfast. This was a commission for the Schlitz Brewing Company, or formerly Schlitz Brewing Company, at what was formerly known as their tasting room, the Schlitz Brown Bottle. And it's reopened as a restaurant now, and the owner had this glass sandblasted, and then I made the frame for the glass. Various sign brackets over the years. This is also up here in Ellison Bay. The sign bracket on the right was in front of the church that my wife and I were married in, a one-room church in Campbellsport, Wisconsin. This was my one of my first commissions back in 1991. I charged $250 for that. The sign itself costs more. So moving on with furniture. One of my more favorite tables, this is out in California, and incorporating some stylized grape leaves, some side tables, coffee table. And then quite often people come to me with objects that they'd like incorporated into a table. The table on the right is incorporating a wood dough bowl. It was carved out of a log. And I've actually made two such stands for two totally different customers. So I've done stands for big, large pieces of float copper from Upper Michigan and various other items. Baker's rack with glass shelving. This is a console table that's in my collection, and I just wanted to have fun with forging, and so I incorporated a lot of different styles of scrolls and acanthus leaves, rosettes, just to do something for me. Just wanted to do something that with elements that I had been working with for many, many years. This is probably one of the most frequently commented upon tables that I've ever made, and I made it fairly early in my career. And I enjoy it just as much. I like the freedom of the movement in there, and how organic it feels. And this was originally made for a private residence in Mequon. It's down in Florida these days. This plant stand, excuse me, was inspired by the work of Albert Paley, sculptural artist, metal artist out in Pennsylvania. And what I really like about this style, which Albert Paley refers to as Art Nouveau, is it really reflects, again, the plasticity of the material along with the strength of the material. And this is one of the tables that's here in the gallery. And this is an accompanying coffee table I made about the same time I made the plant stand. Door hardware. This is probably something that a lot of you are familiar with. And I made much of it over the years, most of it classic in nature. These two styles of door latches, they're called swordfish style. And if you look at the ends, particularly on the left, you'll see vaguely a swordfish, but that is the style of the cusp of the door latches. I had to laugh when a client called me about making these big ass door handles. She's from Bailey's Harbor, and when she called up, she said, "Dan, I need some big ass door handles." So that's why I call them what I call them. And they are rather large. They're 18 inches long. So, but there you have it. That's how names originate. And some miscellaneous items I've made over the years. Here, I wanted to just show some study charts I made, also known as storyboards, on how repoussé evolves, French repoussé. And so these are storyboards I made for Villetaris Decorative Arts Museum. And you can see the final product on the right. So we have an escutcheon on the bottom and a calyx on the top. These are more repoussé elements. This was for a restoration I did out in Ohio, Akron, Ohio, for the former estate of Harvey Firestone Jr. There were two rather large gates on a circle drive, and there were 510 pieces I needed to recreate. The originals were stamped, and they couldn't find anything remotely like them these days. So I took remnants of what was originally in the gate. So there are the gates there. And recreated them through French repoussé. So if you, on the lower right, you can see a lot of the diagnostics I did on the original elements to try and figure out what the original patterns may have looked like. So again, a lot of study, a lot of practice went into recreating these elements. Another 2-year project, and those were back-to-back hours, and also 2 carpal tunnel surgeries, a lot of hammering of cold metal. This is another restoration at the Captain Frederick Pabst Mansion. This is a grill, a very large grill on the north side of the mansion. It's 66 inches wide, 99 inches tall, and I actually made a type of a rotisserie where I could mount the entire grill and then rotate it as I needed to get at various sections of the grill. And yeah, a lot of work and a lot of more French repoussé. Sculpture. This again was inspired by Albert Paley. It's in a private collection in Jackson, Wisconsin. You know, here's a little funny anecdote too. I thought I came up with this motif, this kind of blown out hole, and I was going through some books on metalwork years later, and here was the very same motif. So subliminally, I probably saw these pictures long before I thought I came up with this motif. But anyway, I think that happens often in music as well. So. I made these about 6 years ago, and again, I wanted the feeling of movement, and particularly the towel, but also of the human form. And yeah, I want to do a third to this series, showing the same woman from behind with a towel. This is also here at the gallery. And this is mainly power hammer work where the metal was manipulated through use of a large hammer, power hammer, and with a 150-pound ram to it. And so a lot of power moving the material here. And this is one of two sculptures, very similar sculptures that I made, and I dubbed them diversion because they were a diversion from what I normally do. These are largely fabricated, meaning not as much forging and more welding. This is a smaller scale version of this. This was the first of the two. And I'd like to do more on this level as well, as necessity allows. So time and time will allow. So the sculpture on the right is what, well, let me rephrase that. The sculpture on the left is what the sculpture on the right originally looked like. And I was never 100% happy with it. It felt tight to me. So I wanted to open it up. And I also wanted to do something bolder than I normally do with color. I normally finish things in shades of gray and black. And I wanted to expand and get into color. And so this is also The Winds of November on the right is here at the gallery as well. And that's it for today. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and come on up here to the Peninsula Art School and see the other fine works that are here. Thank you very much for tuning in.